Hey, I'm Jim from Digital Anarchy, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at an extreme example of slow motion flicker, and we're using the Flicker Free plugin from Digital Anarchy to fix it. And we're in After Effects, and so the first step is to apply it from the effects menu, Digital Anarchy Flicker Free. In this case I already have it applied. And none of the built-in presets work for this footage, so I'm going to go through the process of figuring out what settings do work. And to speed the tutorial up, I'm not going to explain what every setting does. We have other intro tutorials that go over that in depth. I just want to show specifically how to solve different types of slow motion flicker. So, since none of the presets work, you want to start out with rolling bands, which is the default. And we can see that it doesn't really solve it for this footage, at least the default settings. So the first thing we want to do is turn off detect motion. And this is going to make things blurry, but at least we'll be able to see if we can get rid of the flicker. And the flicker does disappear, but we know the flicker can be removed. So now the trick is to deal with the blurring. And the easiest way to do that is turn on motion compensation. The other way would be detect motion, but we've already seen that that doesn't work. And so now I've turned on motion compensation, and we can see that does work. We've now gone from this, which is the original footage, to something that looks quite nice. Now, this still can actually be improved a little bit. The time radius, lower values are always better. It's going to render faster. There's less chance of it blurring. And because if we look at the original footage, the flicker is happening on every other frame. It's a very short time span for the flicker. We can try using a lower time radius. And so if I set this to 3, you can see the football actually gets a little bit sharper, and the flicker is still gone. And so what's happening here is time radius, we're looking at 3 frames back from the current frame and 3 frames forward, and that's enough frames to remove the flicker. And so this works really well. You end up with good sharpness on the moving objects, the players, the football, and the flicker in the stands, and the footage generally is gone. But let's take a look at this clip. And again, we have flicker free applied to it. We'll turn this off, and we can see that there's a very slow pulsing. The flicker that's happening here is happening over 10-20 frames. So it's slower, so time radius of 3 definitely won't work. And in fact, you probably want something longer than 8. If we just start with rolling bands, just the default, and we play this back, it kind of gets rid of it, and you may not be able to see this on YouTube, but there's still kind of a pulsing that's happening where there's some flicker. And so we definitely need a longer time radius. So if we crank this up to 16, and then render it out, it's now much smoother, and the flicker really isn't visible anymore. But 16 frames is a lot of frames. You're looking at 16 frames back, 16 frames forward, and so a lower time radius is always better if you can get away with it. And so let's set this back to 8, and then we can set time step to 2, and what's going to happen with that is it's going to look at every other frame. So it's still going to look at 8 frames forward and 8 frames back, but it's going to look at every other frame. And so it's still the same amount of time that 16 frames would be, but we're just looking at every other frame instead of every frame. And if we play that back, you can see that we have the same effect. The flicker is pretty much gone, and it looks more or less the same as what we had when we had time radius set to 16. And with the lower time radius, it's going to render a little bit faster. There's less risk of artifacts. So if you can get away with a lower time radius, that's usually the best case scenario. So that about covers how to deflicker slow motion footage in After Effects with Flicker Free. If you have any footage that you're having trouble deflickering, you can always reach out to us at sales@digitalanarchy.com. Send us a few seconds of it, and we can recommend settings for Flicker Free for you. But of course, you can always go to our website for more tutorials, like an intro tutorial if you want a more deeper explanation of what these settings do. Again, digitalanarchy.com, and thanks for joining me.